Let's go straight to our panel this evening, and my first question to Ambassador K.C. Singh, who joins us on this big story once again tonight. Ambassador Singh, your thoughts when you've heard both sides argue on this today. I think for ordinary viewers, what's really confusing is you have India citing a Vienna Convention protocol on one hand that both countries signed on consular issues, which India has cited is the reason why it went to the international court in the first place, saying that Pakistan has to give India access to Mr. Jadhav. On the other hand, you have Pakistan arguing in court about a bilateral agreement between India and Pakistan in 2008, which clearly says that in matters related to national security, request for consular access will be considered on merits. So which is it? Which actually, supersedes the other?
Let me try breaking down. Basically, your correspondent was right. This is a hearing for a provisional order. Probably that Pakistan answered by saying that clemency period of 150 days is available. So really, there's no question of execution till August. So at least there is one assurance, whether because of India bringing pressure there or whatever reason, at least they have said before the court that there's no likely immediate execution. That takes care of that. So they probably can't do it till the clemency period runs out. Now it's a question of details. They were going to befuddle the argument. They took 3-4 arguments. They took up the 3 cases, the famous cases against US. One the Mexicans did, the Paraguayans did, and the Germans did in 1999, 2001, 2003. The Mexican one was very interesting. There were 50 Mexicans in jails in America sentenced to death. And the Mexicans said, you had not given us a mission any access or them any access to the mission. Finally, President Bush, under an order, accepted the order of the International Court that those trials need to be relooked at. No, and that answers the other question Pakistan is raising, that what is that India can seek? The judgment passed against Jadhav cannot be annulled. So what are you seeking if you can't get it annulled? No, he's wrong there, because even President Bush had accepted this. Although immediately after that, Americans withdrew from the compulsory jurisdiction protocol. But he did it after passing an order that all courts in respect of those 50-odd people will re-look at the orders. So if ab initio the trial is wrong because there's no access to independent, to the High Commission, to a proper lawyer, whatever the charges, then really that trial is bad ab initio. Now that is something that ICJ will have to decide. But Pakistan,
so you're saying that India has a very strong case for the ICJ's jurisdiction, and that you believe, is the bottom line. I'd like to go next to Mr. Ali Sarwar.
No, one second.
Because I have a short slot with Pakistan,
let me just reconcile it.
I have a very short window with.
No, just 2 points.
Quickly, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, because I just have a short window with the Pakistani guest. Ambassador Naqvi, you've heard again both sides of the argument today. How do you see it sitting there in Pakistan? Do you believe that both sides have argued strongly today?
Yes, I think both the sides who are contesting this case have made their points. Now, I want to point out one thing first. The issue is about the ICJ jurisdiction. ICJ jurisdiction applies only in the Vienna Convention for Consular Relations, and that allows access. But Pakistan says that it is overtaken by the bilateral agreement on consular access of 2008. Now, the ICJ should normally dismiss this case because the bilateral relations agreement that overtakes the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. That is one. The second is the sentence. The sentence is not at issue in any case because it is being passed in the context of national security. National security under the bilateral convention is an area where there is no need for giving any consular access, and the decision will be made by the state in its own supreme national interest. That is what Pakistan has done. So I think taking the case to the ICJ in any case doesn't hold much water. But it is for
just
the
want
court
to take
to
what you said,
look
sir.
at this.
I want to take what you said, and you actually, very simply outlined what the Pakistani argument is. Dushyant Dave, who's a senior advocate of the Supreme Court, is with us tonight. So, Mr. Dave, if you could explain for us legally the question I asked at the beginning. Does the 2008 bilateral agreement supersede the Vienna Protocol, Vienna Convention Protocol that the two countries signed in the 70s?
Well, it does and it does not, for the simple reason that the 2008 agreement has apparently not been registered with the United Nations as was required under the international treaty. So, of course, to that extent, India is absolutely right in saying that 2008 agreement, bilateral agreement, really doesn't hold the field. But having said that, the fact of the matter is that we did sign that agreement, and therefore Pakistan has a viewpoint that under the agreement, whether we should have an excess, consular excess or not, and whether Mr. Jadhav should be treated differently or not, and whether he should be treated on merits of the case, is something which I think Pakistan has a legitimate right to argue. But let us understand one thing, and this is where we as a nation really need to introspect. We must all realize that Pakistan is a rogue state. And Pakistan has been indulging in terrorism, which entire world knows. 9/11 in fact emanated from Pakistan. We have suffered thousands of casualties because of terrorist attacks from Pakistan. We should have today at the ICJ, actually portrayed what Pakistan has been doing for last 5 decades. And this is something which unfortunately our argument has missed completely. We should have told international court that, look, we are dealing with a state which is completely not subject to any international law, and therefore this argument that Pakistan has in picking up an innocent citizen from India and portraying him as a spy and therefore denying him consular access and executing him, attempting to execute him through military court, is something which international community should really understand, and I have no doubt ICJ would have looked at it differently. To that extent, I did feel disappointed as a lawyer that India did not project Pakistan as a villain in the international theatre of terrorism.
Okay, that's an interesting point you're making. You're saying that India should have expanded its argument to go beyond this case and talked about state-sponsored terrorism.
I don't know how you can designate Pakistan as a rogue state. I mean, this is ridiculous. Pakistan is a member in good standing of the United Nations, and it is has accepted compulsory jurisdiction of the ICJ in many of its areas of its competence. So Pakistan should not be dubbed or termed a rogue state. This is quite unfair, and this does not make for any meaningful discussion.
Well, would terrorist state sound better? Though I'm not going to get into an argument with you on that, sir, because that's just going to be pointless back and forth between you and me. We can agree to disagree on that. But Jyoti Malhotra, you had expressed a great degree of skepticism the other day when the news of India approaching the international court first broke. After hearing the arguments today, how do you sort of size up both sides?
I think I tend to agree with Dushyant Dave, which is that this whole argument on both sides really balances on a legal interpretation of both conventions, well, on the Vienna Convention as well as the 2008 Consular Agreement. But actually, I think what is interesting about the 2008 Consular Agreement, although it was not registered with the UN, as Mr. Dave points out, is that it was, first of all, it was signed on May 21, 2008 in Islamabad between then Pakistan's High Commissioner to India, Shahid Malik, and India's High Commissioner to Pakistan, Shatabrat Pal. Both these gentlemen signed this agreement, and if you read the agreement, Nidhi, the clause 6 states very clearly that all the privileges that the Vienna Convention accords to prisoners of countries in other sort of hostile nations will not be accorded to security and political prisoners. Now, it doesn't use the word spies, but in common parlance,
security covers a big,
yes,
big
and
umbrella.
that's what we understand. Now, so I'm saying, and that they will be dealt with on their own merit. So, which means that if relations between the two countries are good, then you can perhaps exchange this political prisoner with somebody that you have. If relations are not good, then you have a high-profile, ugly tu meme like we're doing right now. And what I'm a little surprised at is that India is basing its entire argument at the ICJ on this I would argue, a procedural point of the Vienna Convention versus the 2008 bilateral agreement. But actually there is a very substantive point, which is that a military court, in this case in Pakistan, has no right to or to sort of presumably to charge another citizen and say that he will be hanged because he is guilty, because the military court can do what it likes with its own citizens. They cannot do that with a foreign national.
And you feel that argument
I
should have been
think this
made.
is a much more substantive point. I would argue, but anyway, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a journalist. So I think that you have to argue, that's one argument. I would also say that I think in the India-Pakistan story has become so ugly, the relationship has become so ugly. We want to know how Kulbhushan Jadhav was, whether he was kidnapped, whether he was lured. What happened to Kulbhushan Jadhav? How did he arrive in Pakistan? He was in
We may never
he
know
was
that.
in Iran.
We may
Absolutely.
never know the answer to that question, which is what it's come down to. Let me get the political spokespersons in, and Sambit, let me just ask you on what Dushan Dave said, that this was an opportunity to have portrayed to the international community what Pakistan has been doing to India for the last 5 decades, and Jyoti's point that it shouldn't have just been a procedural argument, that we had more substantive points that could have been made.
No, number one, with all due respect to Mr. Dave, he's a very senior lawyer. I believe there are various platforms to address various issues. The issue in hand right now in front of the International Court of Justice is not to prove that whether Pakistan is a rogue or a terrorist nation. I agree that it is a terrorist nation and a rogue nation, that we have to prove in the United Nations, which we are consistently doing. But the issue in hand over here are twofold. Urgent, immediate, provisional measures to be pressed upon Pakistan so that our man in Pakistan is not hanged pending appeal. And second, in the long run, on the merits of the case, annulment of the conviction handed over to Kulbhushan Jadhav by the military court. These are two precise, focused interests of India. So we have to move in the International Court of Law as per the focus. Secondly, and very importantly, as far as Jyoti's concern is concerned, that well, more substantiative argument should have been put. I believe Harish Salve, one of the most reputed lawyers of the country, along with the battery of bureaucrats who have gone no more than most of us, and I believe the collective wisdom is to be saluted. But over here, one very important point that we are missing out is what the Pakistan envoy present in the discussion also was suggesting, is that he was a spy. This whole thing deals with the national interest of Pakistan, but India has challenged that. India has said, why it is that you call him a spy? You call him a spy only on the basis of his own confessional statement, and to this effect, the Indian side has cited many of the press clippings of Pakistani newspapers, because Pakistan did not share any details with India. So India has said that your own press clippings say that there is no evidence, your own pronouncements say that there is no evidence, only evidence in hand is a confessional statement. Over here, India states that the rights of two people have been killed in this case. One, India's right as a republic has been hurt, and right of Kulbhushan Jadhav has been hurt. Right of India, because by Vienna Convention we should get consular access to Kulbhushan Jadhav.
Wasn't just press clippings, it was actually Sartaj Aziz who told the Pakistani Senate in
Yes,
December that there wasn't enough
Aziz's
evidence,
name
and
also
then,
comes in the press clipping.
and then a couple of months later you suddenly have this mysterious military trial. But Manish Tiwari, do you believe that the government of India didn't really have a choice in the matter, and that going to the international court at the end was the right thing to do, the smart thing to do, because today that seemed to have been the only option for the government?
Well, Nidhi, I'm hearing your voice in a very stilted manner, but if I have got the drift of your question, it goes as follows, that was it appropriate for the government to go and approach the International Court of Justice? And if that's your question, the answer is yes. And the reason for that, and I'm not getting into the legal arguments, because that's something for 15 judges of the International Court of Justice to apply their minds to the respective arguments and to come to a decision. But the larger message that we need to send out is that we will go out on a limb for our own people, because going back to 1971, when 54 of our prisoners of war got left behind or remained incarcerated in Pakistani jails, and onwards till 2017, despite repeated attempts being made by different governments at different points in time to get them back, despite the fact that there was a sighting of one prisoner in a jail in Oman. And surprisingly, when one of the newspapers actually put a query, an RTI query to the Indian embassy in Oman in 2017 April, they denied that any Indian prisoner has been incarcerated. There is a general perception that we don't stand by our people, we don't stand by our citizens. And so therefore, I think the important takeaway from India's attempt to take up Kulbhushan Jadhav's case in the ICJ, and I hope the outcome is favorable. It is in favor of India. The death sentence gets annulled. But the larger message that we need to send out as a country is that we will do everything possible in order to get our people back.